So we're back in the mansion library talking about top three craziest religious defenders. I wish there was some better. If you know of some better, please comment. I got to find them. Anyway, these are the top three: Marcus Borg, Richard Swinburne, and CS Lewis. These three people have written about Christianity, have defended it, are Christian themselves, but do it in different ways. We're going to talk about some of the high and low points. I rank them in order, Marcus Borg being the least troublesome, but yet still very troublesome. Marcus Borg wrote a book called Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time that I taught in intro philosophy classes because my mentor was crazy and found Christianity, kind of like C.S. Lewis did, and transitioned from writing dissertation on Freud, and who was an atheist, and believing in miracles. I have no idea what he was talking about. Marcus Borg was in some ways responsible for this transition away from Jesus being the Son of God. And so this gives you the idea of what Marcus Borg is doing. He's really separating a lot of the traditional Christian ideas from what ends up being a new Christianity. So Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time is a really good title because it really means you're meeting him as he really is, differently than what you expect through the tradition. And again, Reformation argument. This is Borg's problem. He's basically reforming the same system again, which has been reformed plenty of times. And now he's trying to say Jesus was a man. He was doing things like you should be doing in order to live the God life, whatever you want to call it, spiritual life, whatever. The three things that Borg denied when I was taking notes, I don't do research, you know that. That's why I'm looking for you to come up with better Christian apologists. And also because if I say something wrong, which is super likely, it's because I don't do research. I don't care. I don't even like these guys. So three things: he doesn't claim Jesus was God. He doesn't think God interferes, and God is not responsible for evil. So all these people have to get around the problem of evil, like everyone does if you're going to believe in any way, unless you develop a God concept, which is very different. If you say God's not good, then it becomes a lot easier to defend. So he doesn't say that. Borg believes more of a pantheistic interpretation. God is everywhere. We can all live this godly life. This will reform Christianity, blah, blah, blah. Reformation fallacy all over again. The biggest problem with Borg, he removes all the historical ideas from theology. Number two, Richard Swinburne, my favorite. I don't know shit about Richard Swinburne. This is more of a philosophy writer, trying to write more like Augustine Aquinas might have done, trying to be a little more rational, which is what Christian apologist kind of means. It means turning these defenses into a more rational, acceptable, convincing, and persuasive system. So Richard Swinburne is the lunatic that claims that natural disasters are here to teach us. So yes, God is responsible for them, but he has to do it in the same way of the best of all possible world theories, which is kind of the Matrix. In the Matrix, you have the guy saying, why didn't you just make the world perfect? And the guy says, well, we did that. People got bored. Swinburne's not saying that. He's saying we need these reminders that the world is evil. Man has made it evil, I guess. Man himself has these problems, balancing good and evil. He needs to choose good. That kind of Christian talking point craziness. So that's Richard Swinburne. One of the interesting takeaways that makes him a little more critical, but also, again, super crazy, is that God is within the time framework, just like man. So in a lot of the traditional Christian senses, which Swinburne does accept, but in a lot of those systems in relation to time, God's outside of time. And so that's where the free will problem comes from, because God kind of grants you free will, but then judges you on it, which is contradictory, doesn't work. But if God's within the time system, then he has no effect on free will, because God requires that free will for himself, which means in the future, something new and something changeable can in fact happen. I've said this a million times. If you believe in free will, you got to believe in the future changing. So if God is within time, then he's not responsible for something super time. He's not responsible for you lacking the free will, having the contradiction, all this stuff that I complain about, because you still have the future as a blank slate for God and for you. I don't know how he justifies this stuff. These are people emotionally justifying stuff. That's why they're my top three. That's why they're crazy. I've tried to help. I'm trying to point out where they do try to throw in some rationality. Even C.S. Lewis doesn't. So that segues us to number one, craziest. C.S. Lewis should have stayed writing children's books about mermaids, whatever the hell he wrote about. I know you're mad. I know you're pissed. I don't do research. I don't like junk books. I hate genre writing. I've never liked C.S. Lewis. The way he writes especially seems so uncritical that it hurts my internal organs. That's why he's number one. But let's talk about what he did. He wrote a book called Mere Christianity, another book I taught in Intro to Philosophy, thanks to my crazy mentor. He wanted to give them a full rounded picture. He thought Borg and Lewis were a way to do that. Wrong. So the book was Mere Christianity, very traditional in his belief, which means he accepts these things like omniscience, being outside of time, beating out justice, things like this. Prayer would work in that sense. So very traditional. We've kind of gone in that order. Borg's the least traditional, Swinburne's in the middle, Lewis is at the top. Very traditional, and if you read the way he writes, he's not critical enough to deviate from any historical perspective in this realm. What he's accused of is the false dilemma. I kind of feel like he's accused of an apologists fallacy. But one of Lewis's major points is the moral law defense. And I've said this because I like the idea of the moral sense from the 18th century, from Scottish common sense. This means we have a built-in moral sense that's objective, which means you can't really do anything about it. It's phenomenological. You can choose not to act on it, but if you have free will, but you do have a moral sense. You naturally have a sense of what's right or wrong. And so Lewis makes the point that if we have that, it cannot be defended without the idea of God. So, and I get what he's saying. It's not like I don't understand his simpleton perspective, look how great I am, white male. It means, that's me, by the way. It means that he's saying it has to be fully grounded, that we do accept the moral sense. We know we have this right or wrong. We definitely model our societies and our rule of law after it, which is what Scottish common sense thinkers were getting at. C.S. Lewis must have been affected by that in a simple, vulgar common sense way. We don't give him credit for that. His point was that we need a God to defend it, or that initial response and certainty that we had is false. So again, so many fallacies. It could just be false. We know that as philosophy people, which means it doesn't have objectivity to it, doesn't have an ultimate foundation. That's an oddist fallacy. It ought to have a foundation, therefore it does. This is in some ways the argument Kant made that he got in trouble for. Kant said a lot of stuff he didn't get in trouble for, which is, to me, people appreciated it. But one of the things that Kant said was that we have to ultimately justify morality and moral sense and the things that we do that show that we definitively believe in these basic foundational right or wrong things. And if we do that, we have to ground them completely. And so in science and biology and a lot of man's simple frameworks and language games, we can't ground it. I agree with that. Utilitarianism is a response to that particular question. All three theories of morality are in some ways responses or compatibilities with this moral sense theory, which is actually what it's called, from the 17th and 18th centuries. Lewis is pointing out this philosophical idea of the moral sense, and he's just making a simple claim that it has to be the case that God is there. So you've got two problems on the surface. One is it's an oddist fallacy. There's no way to claim that it has to be the case because it should be. But more importantly, even if we have the moral sense, like I believe we do, and then maybe we should talk about that, like I believe we should, that in no way leads to the idea of a compartmentalized God or a historical God in any sense, which is to say you can have this grounding by claiming something else similar in power to whatever these creator ideas are that have been developed that are all contradictory and argue with each other and do all this stuff. You could do that with an alien and achieve the same goal and be more believable in the physical world, or at least in the empirical world. So again, just fallacy after fallacy after fallacy. That's why he got number one. Three thinkers: Borg, Swinburne, Lewis. Go read them. Go think about this. This is your homework. Read these people even though they're terrible. Read, especially Borg maybe, and then comment or just send me a message and tell me somebody that's better. Tell me somebody I should be reading. Tell me somebody that does a better job than these people. That's all I'm saying. Thanks for shopping.